Hey, welcome everybody to Spirituality Adventures. We're glad you're tuning into this episode. We are a viewer and listener supported podcast, so we really appreciate you listening, watching on YouTube. We really encourage you to subscribe to whatever platform you're using. If you're on YouTube, hit that subscribe button, or if you're on Apple or however you listen to a podcast, be sure and subscribe. We greatly appreciate it. Also, make comments if you like it and share it if you like it. We really need people to make comments and share the episodes that you like. And then also, if you're not already a supporter, we really would encourage you to go to spiritualityadventures.com and you can pick a tier, and we have bonus content for every type of giver. This is a nonprofit, so they're tax-deductible donations, but we do provide bonus content for those who are supporters. So be a part of the team, help support Spirituality Adventures, and we're so glad you're tuning into this episode. Hey, welcome everybody to Spirituality Adventures. I am so excited to have Jonathan Merritt with us today. Jonathan and I actually met in person in the spring of 2024. At a rooftop event at Rod Colburn's house. Some of you who know me know Rod and our relationship. And but I had been stalking Jonathan on social media for some time before this, right? Because we both have Southern Baptist backgrounds, and we are both now living in a very progressive Christian world, I guess. Maybe is that okay to say, Jonathan?
Yeah, sure, yeah.
And for those of you who don't know Jonathan, he's an award-winning author. He writes on spirituality, politics, and culture. He's a writer for The Atlantic. He's written in most of your major publications, journalist. He's an author of a book. What was the name of the, let's see, I'm blanking. Oh, here it is, Learning to Speak God from Scratch, which came out a few years ago. And then recently he published a children's book, which I've now read at least 6 times, and My Gunkle and Me. So Jonathan Merritt, thank you for joining us on Spirituality Adventures.
My gosh, the pleasure, Fred, is really, it's all mine. Pleasure's mine.
So I like to get a little bit of your background story, like where you were born, your family of origin, how you grew up. I already mentioned that both of us grew up in Southern Baptist homes, but I think you're even more Southern Baptist home than me, Jonathan, right?
I guess so. Yeah, I was raised in the home of a Southern Baptist preacher, and really not just a Southern Baptist preacher. My dad was a television preacher, and a megachurch pastor, and was president of the Southern Baptist Convention starting in 2000 until 2002. And before that had been in all sorts of leadership roles in the SBC. And so, it's hard, I guess, to get more Southern Baptist than we were. In fact, I kind of thought that I kind of thought there was like Catholicism and there was being Southern Baptist, and then, what else really was there? I mean, I knew there were Presbyterians and Methodists and Episcopalians, but I wasn't so sure that they were all really Christian. I knew we were. So, my world was quite small and was sort of centered on a very conservative white Western form of Christianity that I thought was the real true form.
Me too. I got saved at a Southern Baptist youth camp, went off to Baylor University, and met my former wife when I was 19 at Baylor, and her married at 21 because I wanted to have sex before Jesus came back. And and then my in-laws were the best friends of Jimmy and Carol Ann Draper.
Oh yeah, I know the Draper.
So my wedding, they've been a part of my life until I got divorced a few years ago. So, I mean, he would come to my Vineyard Church when he was in town in Kansas City. We'd go out to dinner. I mean, I would know his family, his kids, oh my gosh. So I went to Baylor and Southwestern Baptist Theological Seminary.
Wow.
You went to, let's see, your undergraduate was
At Liberty University.
Oh, you went to Liberty.
I went to Liberty. I was going to go to the University of Georgia, and my brother went there and partied like a rock star. And so my parents said, yeah, you're not going there. You're going to Liberty. And my dad was on the board. My dad was on the board at Liberty, and he brought me up there, and Jerry Falwell sort of sat me down and gave me the pitch. And next thing you know, I was there. So it was an interesting experience. I'll say that.
And then you went to Southeastern Baptist Theological Seminary, did the MDiv, right?
Mm-hmm.
Is that right? So for those who don't know, my Gunkel and me, we're going to talk about this here in a few minutes. Gunkel is short for what?
Yeah, it's a kind of contraction of gay uncle.
Gay uncle.
It's a term of endearment. To be a gunkel, and it really is, I think, a way to recognize that you're coming with a unique experience, and that you're offering unique gifts to a family that other aunts and uncles don't have to give, because you're a fighter, because you come from a group of people who are often largely misunderstood or maligned, and you come with a certain perspective on the gift that difference can bring, and so it makes you, I think, a really special member of the family. So I love the title.
So you grew up gay in a Southern Baptist home of one of the major Southern Baptist leaders in the world.
Mm-hmm.
When did you come out? And give us a little glimpse into, like, what all, I can't even imagine, Jonathan. Like, did you start out trying to pray the gay away? How young were you when you give us a little window in that if you're comfortable with that.
Yeah, I mean, for me, I didn't have an awareness of a true awareness of my sexual orientation. I mean, like, when I say, that part in the back of the closet where, like, you have shoes you don't even remember buying. That's where I was. I was way back in the closet. I knew that I had an attraction to people of the same gender since I was quite young, maybe fifth grade or less, probably less. But I had a growing awareness of who I was. And I think I was waiting. I was like, I'm going to meet that one woman who's going to change, I'm going to fall in love with. I just haven't met, that one woman. And it took me a very long time. I would say I was probably in my late 20s by the time I was really coming to understand this might be who I was. And at that point, I felt really trapped. I was a teaching pastor at my dad's church.
Wow.
I graduated from seminary. I had written and published 2 books, Christian books. And, that was my livelihood, my family relationships, my friendships, my career, everything was in this world. And this world I knew would have no room for me.
Mm.
as a gay person. I didn't know one gay person in that world.
Wow.
And that's the world I was in when, just days before my 30th birthday, I was pushed out of that closet.
How did you get pushed out?
Well, I had written an article for USA Today called An Evangelical's Plea, Love the Sinner. And it was really a critique of this phrase, love the sinner, hate the sin. I think it's a really terrible phrase. It's a phrase that you'll never find anything close to it in the Bible. And it's a phrase that if you try to live it out, you realize it's impossible because hate directed toward sin tends to shade very much the way you think about the people who are committing those quote unquote sins. And I was sort of decrying that and saying, why is it that our community does not truly love LGBTQ people, even though we keep saying we love the sinner, and yet all we do is hate sin? And I was, at the time, I had no idea. I wasn't fully conscious of it, but I was writing that I wanted people to love me. And a guy who was gay, a Christian, reached out to me, befriended me. We developed a relationship, friendship, a warm friendship over the years. We had one encounter where we, made out in the backseat of his car. We didn't have sex. And I just broke off our friendship. I said, this is too much for me. I need to process this. I was probably 26 at the time, 27, who knows. And a few years later, he decided that he would tell the world. And so, I woke up one day and I had a Google alert, and it was an article that he had written on his blog, which ended up becoming an article at salon.com, which spawned a whole bunch of other articles at the Washington Post and Christianity Today. And it was a time of complete disarray.
Oh, wow.
And I'm really lucky because there are a lot of people who've walked through that experience and they're not here to tell their stories. And I am. And so I consider myself one of the lucky ones that I survived the awful thing.
Yes.
That he did.
Wow. Holy crud. Wow. So then you're in this crazy position where you have to process this stuff like with your family, basically in public almost to some degree.
Mm-hmm.
Is that right?
That's right.
I think that's been one of the, I've seen some of the interaction with you and your dad, and all the dynamics of that just like, holy crap. I mean, I don't have the depth of what you went through, but I wound up on the front page of the Kansas City Star about 6 years ago as a megachurch pastor who went to rehab, who was an alcoholic, an addict, and an adulterer. So your situation is totally different, but you had to process stuff that you wouldn't want to process in public. And I certainly wouldn't have wanted to process my shit in public, you know what I mean? But anyway, that's what ended up happening on my end of the stick, because I had to process it. So I can maybe just tell us about your experience of processing that with your dad publicly. I'm just curious.
Yeah. Well, you would almost have to follow up with a question like when, because it's been now 12 and a half years almost. Yeah. And when it happened, that was, I was afraid, and I said things that I believed would keep me safe. And for me, that was necessary at the time. But, I also really regret it. It wasn't like I stepped out in high heels with a rainbow colored baton and, led a parade down the street. Instead, I was like, hey, this is something that happened once. It was 3 years ago. It's not who I am. I love Jesus, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And I really gave people the impression, I never said that I was going to be celibate, but I gave people the impression that I was going to follow the Bible as we conservative Christians understood it. And that bought me time to go and do some intensive counseling and therapy and to find my way out. And so that first phase with my dad was the don't ask, don't tell phase. We didn't really talk about it. And that went on for, to some degree for a number of years. And it was very, very slow that we came to begin to speak more openly in our family about these things. And I'll tell you, I've often said to kids, like sometimes I'll have young kids come to me who are coming out to their parents and they're frustrated. They're frustrated because their parents don't get it. And, they had the conversation last Tuesday and their parents are still struggling. Well, what I often say is, it took you 8 years to come to an awareness and embrace who you were. And it's going to take your parents longer than 8 days. That we often, it's like the moment that we complete our journey, we expect everybody else to transport themselves, Star Trek style,
wow,
to the place where we are, not realizing, well, now you've just kicked off their journey, and their journey may take, not always, but it may take at least as long as yours did. And if you can learn to give yourself the grace that you need to have taken the time that you've taken, then what would it look like to attempt to offer some amount of grace to the people in your life? So I offer grace. There was that avoidance strategy really served us in that time. It allowed us to both kind of in private come to grips with our new reality. A year after I was outed, a little over a year, I moved to New York City. And that for me was what liberation looked like. What does liberation look like for you? Well, for me, it meant I needed to decrease our proximity to each other. I needed distance. For me, there was a geographical quality to liberation. And what I didn't need was to wrap my mouth around the word gay and say it out loud. I didn't need that at that time. What I needed was a lot of therapy and a good bit of distance from my parents. Because my parents were, it's just who they are. They're prominent people in the community. They're public figures. That my dad is a kind of old style baby boomer, John Maxwellian leader. So they have a kind of, they're like a collapsed star or a black hole. They have a gravitational pull. And there's nothing you can do but sort of exist in their universe unless you have a little distance. And with a little distance, I was able to individuate. And so that was for me the beginning of the journey of creating really a beautiful relationship with a father who to this day does not hold the same views I do theologically or politically. And it comes with a lot of challenges. We can talk about any of these things if you want. But it is in its own way a beautiful relationship, I think.
Mm. Wow. I'm curious, what resources, either individuals that you could name or books that you read, that helped you begin to affirm who you were in a way that I think your children's book, I'm tapping into the theme of this book right now, but the big theme there is that self-compassion and self-acceptance of who you are at the core of your being. And with the way you grew up, like I did, we would have thought that love the sinner, hate the sin thing, which I've come to despise that statement, because now I just realize almost evangelicals do with that statement is just hate people. Mm-hmm. They don't really love people at all. It just becomes an excuse to hate. I have a dear friend here in Kansas City I've interviewed that wrote a memoir called Godly But Gay, who grew up in the Independent Baptist Church and became an Independent Baptist Church planter who thought Southern Baptists were liberal. And he was gay the whole time, always kept, went to Christian college, married a Christian girl, had kids, always thinking being a pastor would always change his gayness. And then it never did. And then it finally just, broke and he came out. But yeah, what were the resources that you found to help begin to affirm who you were at the core of your being?
Well, I think for a lot of people, they need to really make peace with the Bible. The Bible's their biggest hurdle intellectually. Mm-hmm. And so that's why for a lot of people, I think God and the Gay Christian, or even, David Gushie's book, Change Our Mind, those books are kind of seminal texts, because they have to make peace with the fact that if you believe that God, in whatever it means, inspired the Bible, then if the Bible is an anti-gay text, then it's hard to reconcile a Christian identity and a gay identity. And if you can be Christian or you can be gay, you have to choose. Now, that was not, I read God and the Gay Christian, but I not right when it came out. I read some of these books and they were great. I think they're great. I love James Brownson, if you're a little more academically bent like I am. I think his Bible Gender Sexuality is a really fantastic text. He's a fantastic New Testament scholar. I think Matthew Vine's book, which is a kind of popularizing of some of the same kind of arguments, is a great book. For me, it was less of a journey into the issue itself, and instead a recentering on one. I began to read people who I knew were affirming. And I saw in their books undeniable fruit of faith. And I read mainline Christian writers who were happy to perform gay marriages, and yet, in fact, I not only did I find that their writing was fruitful, it was so much. It had so much more emotional intelligence and spiritual maturity than anything I had encountered in evangelical literature. I mean, you can find some evangelical writers who are deep, but most of them are doing some form of regurgitation, theological regurgitation. They're taking a kind of snapshot of a theology, which is usually like Protestant Reformation theology, and they're giving it some kind of conservative American political overlay, and then they're regurgitating it. So, they may have, you may be Max Lucado and you've got better illustrations than the next person, or you might be Ann Voskamp and you've got some kind of poetic turns of phrases. Or there maybe you put your spin on it, but it's really somebody saying something that somebody else has said 100 times in their own way. And what I was finding in these mainline writers is they weren't just synthesizing old views, but there was a kind of theological imagination. And I began in that to find my faith was coming alive in a new way. It was no longer a kind of flashcard faith, but it was imaginative and it was dynamic. And so I began to see life in communities where I was told, I had been warned, oh gosh, if you accept these ideas, you'll find no life. You'll find death. You'll find spiritual death. And I was finding the opposite. I was finding that the lie had been that I would find death in those communities. So that was one. And I would say beyond that, it was returning to the big theological questions. Can I be gay and Christian is actually a rather small theological question. It is big functionally to a queer person who wants to reconcile those issues. But in the grand sweep of the kinds of questions we ask as sort of spiritual people, it's a rather small question. It's not a question that most people who have spent time thinking about these things over the centuries have spent a lot of time thinking about. We think about them a lot today, but we think about them because we happen to be born in the aftermath of the sexual revolution, and we're really trying to wrestle with these, and we think about sex more. We talk about sex more than the Bible talks about sex, sexual orientation. We talk about it more than it's ever been talked about in Christian history, and I actually think that there's some wisdom in that the other questions have a way of answering this question in the secondary. So I ask questions like, what's God like?
Yay.
And if you think that, if your conclusion is that God is an angry ogre who will, torture you in his torture chamber forever and ever and ever and ever and ever, because you, perhaps against your own will and desires, happen to be attracted to and want to share life with a human being who doesn't fit the category that somebody else says they should. If that's who you believe God is, well, it's a very small jump to the kind of infernalism, anti-gay theology that you find in evangelical circles. But if you really believe that God is love, that God is whatever God is, God must be at least as loving as the most loving parent that you could ever know. So think about the most loving parent you know and think, can you imagine that parent torturing his own child because they didn't marry who he wanted them to marry, or he didn't love who he wanted them to love? No, you can't imagine that. Then there's no space in your theological imagination for a God who's less loving than that.
Wow.
God has to be at least as loving as the most loving person you know. And so as I began to kind of return to these questions, these big, big questions, it just sort of worked itself out of my theology. Obviously, I began to read the Bible differently. But you don't need to have the 6 clobber passages to realize that reading the Bible in a literal way, which nobody really does, is just a dead end street. All you have to do is try to live your life in the confines of literalism, and the fruit of it is really rotten.
It is.
Most people who've tried it know it. So for me, it wasn't like I found my way out, on a set of, stepping stones in the library.
Mm, 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 mm. Your situation to me is just like who you are at the core of your being. And I like, we were raised on this original sin theology, and I think separation theology, and this God who's kind of schizophrenic, who, sometimes he's really angry and he's going to punish the hell out of you, and then sometimes he's really gracious. And I literally let go of everything I'd ever believed when I went through my darkness. And then it was Richard Rohr and Brian McLaren, a few other people like that who helped me start rethinking, and sort of the open relational process crowd like Tripp Fuller and stuff. One of the things Tripp says quite often is, shouldn't we have a God that's at least as nice as Jesus? And so, this central core of how I would understand God is an uncontrolling love is kind of what I would boil it down to. And then just really tried to press into that theme of love. God is love. And that's my number one thing to hang on to, and then to reread, I did the same thing and just started rereading the Bible through all different other kinds of lenses that weren't the lenses that I grew up with. And it's actually, I love your term imagination. It's been far more life-giving and fruitful and imaginative and freeing for me than the literal confines of the hermeneutics that I grew up with. So, thanks for sharing that. I'm curious, I want to highly recommend this for all of our readers. Buy this, get it for your kids, read it. And by the way, I just did my third gay wedding, Jonathan, 2 weeks ago.
Wow.
And, posted it on my Facebook, but I still have a lot of evangelical followers. And so I ended up having to, anyway, it was interesting, but I had hundreds and hundreds of people affirming it, which was really cool because I still have a pretty big evangelical following, but had to X out a few people,
Oh my gosh. I totally know exactly what you're saying.
But I just keep pressing into love and challenging people to rethink those 6 clobber passages. And I try to give them resources like you just named out, good theologians who love Jesus, who show that these verses don't really talk anything about sexual orientation or who you love. Yeah. And at the core of your being, all of us human beings, I think, are loved by God, affirmed by God. We're created in the image of God with the dignity of God. And I think that's the message that your book brings out to children. And as an adult, I found myself embracing wholeheartedly because I think the version that I had been raised with was I was a dirty, rotten sinner. And that's who I was. And the only way I could get that transformed was, which I love Jesus all the way around, but I think the Bible starts with original blessing, self-compassion, self-acceptance, self-love as the heart of the core of who God is and who God made us to be. And we don't, help me out here, because you hear what I'm going at. I think your book, the message of it is self-acceptance and self-compassion at a very young age for children. And I know at a very young age, I bought in the idea I was a dirty, rotten sinner.
Yeah.
Can comment about that as you wrote this book for children and their identity and who they are.
Yeah, it is. It's a narrative book about a kid named Henry, and it's inspired by my own life and the nephews and nieces, both the genetic ones that I have and also the chosen ones that I have. my experiences with them and what they taught me and what I was able to kind of share with them from my life. And you're exactly right on the themes. I'm not trying to help kids embrace their sexual orientation. That's not the point. Henry, the lead character in the book, is not imagined to be gay or straight or anything. He's just a kid who feels different. I think it could help a kid who happened one day later to realize that he was gay, because he'll have some of the basic tools of love and acceptance, embrace of his own uniqueness that you need to survive that experience. But it could be anything that makes you feel different or weird as a kid. The good thing is that, I do talk about God in the book, and that it's not a Christian book. It's not even a religious book, but I talk about God in the book. And there's a whole scene in the book, a spread where the Gunkel and Henry and his family go to church together. And, a lot of reviewers were really confused.
Interesting.
In fact, if I can recite it from memory, I'll see. It says, at church the next morning, my Gunkel sings loudly. He prays and gives thanks, and he does it devoutly. His bright colored outfit makes two women stare. When we pass, they both snicker, but he doesn't care. And the illustrations are so great. And
for those of you who are watching on YouTube, beautifully illustrated by Joanna
Carrillo. And he's wearing this like bright plaid top coat, which actually the end papers of the book match it, because I sort of see it as like the emblem of his own uniqueness and his own self-embrace. But you can see Henry kind of looking up at him and realizing what's going on. And what I wanted to teach kids that specifically related to faith or to religion is that there are going to be a lot of people in the world who will tell you that you can either be gay or Christian. And the truth is that you can be both. You can hold together those seemingly disparate identities, even if other people say that you can't. And sometimes you're going to encounter religious people who they're not going to like you. They're not going to misunderstand you. They may actually be offended by your own embrace of your true self, by your own embrace of your own identity. They may malign you or judge you or condemn you, particularly when you enter religious spaces and houses of worship. But what I wanted to model through this Gunkel is that's okay, because you can still hold your head high and know that you can embrace who you are, even if other people can't.
I love that. Beautiful. I noticed as well you gave thanks to Mr. Rogers.
I did.
I love that. When I was at Baylor, my roommates and I on Saturday mornings early in our apartment complex would put our speakers out into the quad at Baylor and play It's a Beautiful Day in the Neighborhood just to irritate those who are sleeping in with a hangover,
Oh yeah, I love that. He's a hero of mine.
Yeah.
I once wrote an article for The Atlantic about him. It's one of my favorite articles I ever wrote for The Atlantic. And it was about how he should be sainted, even though he wasn't Catholic. He was Presbyterian. He was actually a Presbyterian minister.
Right.
Who was ordained as an evangelist to children through television.
Isn't that wild? Yeah.
Went to seminary, and was a really brilliant Christian, and was an early evangelist of self-embrace and embracing your identity. He had a profound impact in my life, because you can, now that we've talked a little bit about the way I was raised, imagine for a moment coming home from school or preschool and, your mom sits you down for your snack and turns on the TV, and here's this person who's kind of a surrogate father figure.
Yeah.
And he was intentionally trying to be that.
Mm.
And he looks you seemingly in the eyes and says, you make today a special day by just your being you.
Wow.
There's no one else in the whole world like you, and I like you just the way you are. I mean, he was like, a life coach, a father, a therapist, all of these things rolled into one for a kid who was growing up like me. And so when I wrote this book, I thought, I think I'm carrying on his work in my own way. I'm carrying on his message, the message that the good news that he gave me every single day. And I'm trying to pass that along to another generation. So, yeah.
That was beautiful. I was sitting in rehab about 6 years ago. And of course, you can't hardly watch anything. They take your cell phones and all that kind of stuff. But that movie came out with Tom Hanks.
Oh, yeah.
And they let us watch that. Oh, my God. I cried my way through that whole dang movie. So I was in rehab in Georgia.
Yes.
There watching this, just weeping. Oh, my gosh.
I did the same thing. I cried my way all the way through it. And then I don't know if you ever saw A Beautiful Day in the Neighborhood, the documentary.
I did, yeah.
But even after that one, and I remember seeing it, the whole place had left and they're sweeping it. And I'm sitting there just like face in hand, still crying in the theater. And it was intense. I have an enduring connection with him. So I guess we have that in common, you and I.
Well, that's beautiful. It's man, it's good. Yeah. So, we're about out of time, Jonathan.
Oh my gosh.
I know I could keep going for on and on and on, but let me encourage people to tune in to your webpage. Probably is the best way to connect, right?
Yes. JonathanMerritt.com. And MERRITT. Yep. You can find it right there.
And he's got, you can sign up for his newsletter. You can see many of he writes for a number of different, but the Atlantic is the main place that you write as a journalist.
It has been, yes, for the last number of years. But these days I'm writing a lot on Instagram and just finding new ways. I have a newsletter that you can sign up for. And so, yeah, connect with me on social media on Instagram or subscribe to my newsletter at jonathanmerritt.com.
And Christmas stocking stuffers. Well, maybe not fit in a stocking, but set it right next to the stocking. Get this for children for Christmas, everybody. Oh, although we're sitting here before Christmas, I might have to get this out now before Christmas, John. I just realized this might. I'm not sure when this is going to post. Maybe
you know what you can do? You can get it. You can get it with all the gift cards that you got at Christmas.
There you go. There you go. But no, it's a great book, and I have it sitting out in my house now. And as people rotate through who have children, I say, "You got to get this for your kids." My
gosh, I love that.
It's been fun. Well, thanks so much for joining us at Spirituality Adventures. My heart is like I could keep going and going and going, but I need to cut it off here and let you get to what you're going to next. Well, I hope to see you again in New York sometime.
I would love that. You let me know when you're passing through. Please do. Yeah,
Rod's a good friend, and that whole crowd. His pastor Jackie Lewis, but also the Smir Slamanovic from Croatia is there too. I'd say that those are two people that we would consider close friends. And so, yeah, thanks so much. And everybody, thanks for tuning in to Spirituality Adventures. Hope to see you next time. Thank you. God bless. Have a good new year, 2025.
Hey, you made it to the end. Thanks for listening all the way through on this episode. By the way, if you're not already a supporter, go to spiritualityadventures.com, sign up for one of our monthly supports, and you will receive our bonus content. You'll receive lots of interesting information about our guests. Many of our musicians will do special bonus songs and record a song. So I want to encourage you to do that. Thanks for listening. Thanks for watching. Be sure and subscribe. Be sure and share any of the episodes that you like. And be sure and make comments if you like them as well. This helps us get Spirituality Adventures out there to more listeners, more watchers. So whatever platform you're using, subscribe, like, share, make comments, and go to our website, sign up for our team, and be a part of the team support. Thank you so much, and we'll see you next time.